We've been having some pretty great discussions about what education is actually for, the goal and purpose of sending children to school. And as I've shared with you all, I think that this is really at the core of the Chromebook debate and even a lot of the intuitions that parents have against technology. Today, you will notice that I am joined by someone who maybe looks familiar because she is my sister. This is Jane Collins Boutwell, who is an artist and a teacher in various ways and a mother of four. Just happens that we are on vacation together with all of our chaotic kids, and she has been sharing some interesting ideas she's come upon about education, and I thought it might be helpful to you all for us to have a little conversation about that. In the realm of pushing back against what education has become in this country, a lot of people are finding a variety of different ways to educate their children, whether that's Waldorf education or Montessori. And my sister, Jane, has lately become really interested in the idea of Charlotte Mason. It's new to me, so I'm learning along with you all, but I just wanted to have a really short chat with her about what these ideas are and how they've impacted her and her family. Again, family of four, her oldest just graduated from high school, her youngest is 10, so she's had a lot of experience with a range of ages, and yes, we're just going to share a little bit about some of the things we've been talking about and things that she's learned. So what is Charlotte Mason, and how did you come up with these ideas?
So Charlotte Mason is an educational philosophy that I've used for actually almost a dozen years.
So not new for her, new for me.
She was a woman in England who some people would call her an educationist nun or an educational nun. She gave her life to the education of children and the educating of teachers and parents to better educate children. She lived in the Ambleside area, which is actually where Beatrix Potter lived, and she died about 100 years ago. Her philosophy kind of, people lost track of it, but there's been a very big resurgence that started in the 80s and has really taken up steam since 2020. There are just schools, homeschools, hybrid, micro schools. There's a charter school that I talked to at this conference. I just went to the Charlotte Mason Institute CMI conference last weekend, and it's just on fire because it so aligns with the heart of making education about personhood versus utility. And she was fighting against people who just thought, especially the lower classes, were just good for educating to the degree that they could be factory workers. And she believed in the personhood of children. So that's at the core of that philosophy.
She had these ideas 100 years ago, as you said, and wrote a lot about them. But then it turns out that many of her intuitions are now being supported by a lot of research and data. So could you say more about some of the specific philosophies that are there? And
it's been incredible to believe in your core and your intuition that this is an education that brings life and flourishing and feels rich. And then to have the studies coming out supporting that. So one of her methods of educating the child is exposing them to the real sources and stories. She said that that they're not empty receptacles to just be filled with facts, but you need to respect their personhood and give them the full story and allow them to pull out. And they use a tool called narration. So you read small sections of stories and books, and then they narrate back. They tell what they heard instead of trying to get the right answer. They get to just pull out and digest what's for them. So there's that narration, but also exposure to story instead of isolated facts. And the science shows that if something's couched in a narrative arc, we get so much more out of it. We're so much more likely to remember those things. They find a place.
The information makes sense in context. And even when we were talking a few weeks ago about reading in a book, you know your place in the physical book. Similarly with a story, if you're connected to the story itself, you can understand the facts and information as part of that whole.
Exactly.
You've also said that she presents information as sort of a feast, and this idea of lots and lots of delicious things to take for nourishment rather than just you mentioning the data or the idea of just information being downloaded. I think much of our school system right now is about just kind of this, again, this machine-oriented way of thinking. A child is just a downloadable device, right? Where you just have to put everything in there and make sure they pass the exams and then we're good to go. When in fact, they're spending a lot of hours in a place that's really shaping them as a human and as a person, as you said.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us more about the feast, like how, I think you mentioned to me before we were talking that history isn't just history, it's ancient history, it's so many different parts of history that I think now history is really not taught in a lot of schools. It's one of the big problems.
Yeah, I think she had such a well-rounded view of what should be offered, knowing that children are persons unique and that they have different things that are going to ignite their imagination. And she wanted to offer living ideas. So not pre-digested facts. You don't read the story and then tell them, now here's the moral of the story. You don't make the lessons so long that they get tired and lose track of what they're hearing, because that just builds this habit of inattention, of losing attention. So you keep the lessons really short so you have time for a lot of different things. So instead of history and literature, you have citizenship, where you study Plutarch and the lives of these ancient Romans, looking for their character flaws and the choices that they made and the outcomes that came of that. You have ancient history with mythology, getting the Norse and Greek myths that are shaping so much of how our illustrations and our metaphors. You get modern history, the place that you're from, U.S. history for us. You get poetry, and you get Shakespeare. My child's a fourth grader, and we're going to be reading an entire play of Shakespeare from the original language and seeing what my fourth grader is going to get from it. When we circle back to that in a few years, she's going to get a lot more and a lot different things, but it doesn't undervalue what she can get and enjoy as a fourth grader.
I love this original so much. Yeah, going to the original sources and not these very watered down versions that you said before, kind of the childlike version or the gamified version that we've been talking about here.
She had a great respect for the personhood of children. That was one of her key. If you look up the 20 principles of Charlotte Mason, a child is a person already as it is one of the top things.
So one of the things, as much as I love this philosophy and probably a lot of other folks might really resonate with that, it does sound challenging for a teacher to be so highly individuated. And I know that you're going to homeschool one of your children. So like a parent, a mother, or any parent that's homeschooling maybe has that interest and that ability to really individuate the lessons or the way that they're being taught. But of course, I think a lot about in New York, schools that have, they have classes that are way over enrolled. The teachers are extremely strapped for resources. I wonder how, that sort of challenge of fitting a private, more, just more individuated and more focused way of teaching. Have you seen, are there schools where people can do this in a larger capacity or with students that are, how do they make that work in an environment?
Yeah, there are a lot of schools that are adopting this. In fact, there was a school with special needs kids that they are adjusting this for that. There's a charter school. It's definitely possible. You have to trust this process instead of trusting this grammar worksheet to teach it. You have to trust that if you continue to copy and read and recite good literature, it will absorb and eventually come back out. But there are also ways that you can do this if you are just amending your education from home.
Yeah, what would be ways you would say?
So Charlotte Mason said education is an atmosphere, a discipline, and a life. So it's the atmosphere of your home and what you're modeling. So if
there's the challenge for many of us
that
parents.
That is the challenge.
Checking our own habits with technology and learning.
So it's not just what we're trying to tell them to do or get them to do, but it's what our home life is like. What do we do? So adding in something like bringing that life, that living idea to the dinner table, 10 minutes while you're already sitting down together, and just sitting down together as it is.
Yeah, right. That's
that's a feast of ideas, having conversations, no phones at the dinner table. Give us 10 minutes. Let's read 5 minutes of a story and spend 5 minutes saying, what'd you hear? What did make you notice? What did make you wonder? What did make you remind you of? Where does it fit in a relationship of thoughts you already have as a person?
Yeah, and one of the truths from Aristotle that I teach in class about virtue ethics is that we are so fundamentally imitators and that we learn from role models and people in our lives. And I think, again, I have a lot of empathy for teachers, many of whom have commented on my, this community about how burned out they are and exhausted, but that, kids really are looking to the teachers in their lives, the parents in their lives, any everyone, their own peers, to see how to behave in this world and how to participate, and again, like, get the most that they can out of whatever they're being offered. So it is a good challenge for all of us to remember that, yeah, it's not just what we say, it's also what we do. And
well, and it's how you spend your days is how you spend your life.
yeah,
So
and all the little choices do add up.
mm-hmm.
You've shared with me a few kind of key quotes or things that you found really meaningful there. Oh, look, index cards here. So yeah, give us some of the quick ideas, summary.
Yeah, so one thing that Mason said was, it doesn't matter how much they know, but how much they care. So I think we have this tendency to feel like we've got to get as many facts as we can in, but maybe it's more about shaping their character by trusting a story to show what unfolds as a person makes choices of value, and stirring up that longing to be somebody who cares about what is good, true, and beautiful. And let's see, we talked about that one. Again, about the modeling, one of the teachers who showed up to Scale How, which was her teaching place where she taught teachers, and Charlotte Mason approached this new young woman and said, "So why are you here?" And she said, "I'm here to learn to teach." And Charlotte Mason said, "Oh, my dear, you have come to learn to live."
Right.
Because it's not this idea of being the teacher who must manipulate the facts in an appealing enough way to get the child to do it. It's trusting the child has a hunger to learn. And if you give them living ideas and stories, they're going to learn. You just need to model a life that takes time to read those things and spends time in nature. Another thing that she said was
the key
nature studies, spending time in nature to explore, let the child find and discover these facts for themselves. That's their first science. And she said nature teams with teaching. And as in my art practice, that's one of the key places where I learn about design and process and symbolism, is by spending time in nature. So it's a huge part of it.
Yeah, and I think that certainly resonates with many of us. I think we all know that. Lots of studies show that a walk in a park, lowers your cortisol and stress by such a large degree. It's challenging for a lot of us who live in more urban environments to find, have access to nature. And I think another thing you and I were talking about is like, you could put rocks and ferns and things on the table and have your kids, maybe they would start to be interested. But again, there's a balance between the things that we have to do as a parent to help them detox from the really intense dopamine rewards that they might receive from a tablet or from video games, which is the challenge I have with my son, to then direct their attention to something that is a little more challenging. It is more, slower.
It's slow.
Yeah, you're really, I'm looking at pine cones over there. It's like, yeah, not necessarily going to be the most appealing immediately to a child, but if you are leading them towards that, they're going to find some joy and appreciation in it. Another thing I wanted to say was she's kind of pointing to the fact that the entire world is your learning environment, and that learning shouldn't be just compartmentalized into school, where unfortunately so much surrounding that is almost sends these implicit messages that it's boring, I even remember in high school, I had a history teacher who, not throwing him under the bus, but he even said at the beginning of class, "Well, just help us make it through the dry bones of history." And I was like, oh, I guess, even as I like history, I certainly see a value in history. And it just sort of, even the teacher's attitude made me think, oh, maybe this is just dry and boring, instead of presenting these things that at the end really are fascinating. This is human history. This is the way that we've understood our world and still learning to understand our world.
Well, and if you picked off the meat of the story and you're just presenting the facts,
could be pretty dry,
and the history, here's the numbers, here's the death, that is dry bones. There's nothing to chew on. So a living idea is something that a child can't just get the fact immediately. They have to digest it and think on it, and it lives on in their mind and heart for a while and slowly unfolds its meaning.
And I think for parents, many of us, our desire would be for our children to be lifelong learners. Truly, well into your 80s and 90s, however long you live, have that curiosity for what's going on around you. And unfortunately, as many of us have begun to feel, that our school system doesn't exactly nurture that.
Well, we've all become addicted to these screens. They're designed to do that. And in my journey of parenting 4 kids, my oldest is 19 and headed out, there have been times where we've had to say, this has got to stop because we're not in a good place. And a screen fast is an incredible resource, not to be underestimated, even if it's just for a week. But if you look at the brain scan of a child or anybody who's using screens with a lot, enough to have these addictive responses, it looks like the brain scan of somebody addicted to drugs.
Yeah, it's
What's
incredible.
amazing is that we have a tenacity and an ability to heal. And if you take 3 weeks with no screens, a child's brain looks exactly like a healthy brain again. And after a few days of whining and I don't know what to do with myself, my kids start playing with blocks again, doing a puzzle, going outside and having ideas of what to do. So as a parent, when you just it's like frying a frog, you slowly, like it just like the behaviors and the addiction just like slowly creeps in until you wake up and you're like, this is terrible. We've lost our love of learning, our curiosity, our interest in anything else. But taking a break and saying, we need a screen fast is a really good habit of life.
Yeah, and I think there's a huge movement towards that and a lot of folks who are giving you the steps towards that. Yeah. But I think it's really powerful, and get back to the idea of modeling. The more that even if I can try to put those habits at work in my own life, like my kids are going to see it too and be like, oh, right, we don't just have to carry our phone around with us everywhere. We don't have to look up something the minute it comes to our mind. Like my son even now is like, I have to look up something right now. Like, you can just hold on to that idea and then we'll have some time later. Mm-hmm. So you were saying, obviously your ideas are in a lot of schools in the U.S. There's been a real resurgence, probably due to, a kind of exploding of homeschooling coming out of the COVID era. And also, I think, a pretty big message about the rejection of where education is in the moment. So, one thing that comes to mind, of course, we have a lot of things that have changed in education over the last few years. In New York State, they were going to introduce a humanoid robot into a class in upstate, but parental concern pushed back those efforts. So that's fantastic, at least for now. But of course, many of us, both in higher ed and in all levels of schooling right now, are really dealing with a lot of issues about AI. And even the concern I'm hearing from my students in college, where it's not only the pressure that they are feeling and the fact that many of them are using it, but that sometimes professors will even use AI for their PowerPoints. So
or grading.
It's, many of us are saying it feels like this exercise in nihilism because you've got AIs talking to AIs and bots talking to bots. So like this kind of, what's the purpose? What's the point of it all? And I think Charlotte Mason gives us a really great answer.
Yeah, I think, having my older kids, it's like, I could just turn this to AI to do my homework for me. And then my teacher is going to use an AI grading system, which for those who don't use AI is intensely demoralizing to know I wrote this paper as a human while everybody else got the easy right out.
And it really is hard for.
And then it's only graded by AI and my teacher didn't read it. And then you just have to get to like, what are we doing here? And I guess for some people, maybe it's just childcare. Maybe you just need childcare. But education could be developing a human who has the capacity to be a citizen that contributes to a flourishing community and to live a life that is vital, being as alive as they can be, a mind that's active and curious to the end.
Yeah.
So
I love that. And it's really interesting to learn about. And as I said, there are a lot of different types of educational philosophies that people can learn about. But Charlotte Mason, cool.
Yeah, check her out. You can find a lot more, of course, where we all look. And you can also find some books. One of the original books that was reawakening this movement was For the Children's Sake, written by Susan Schaefer Macaulay back in the 80s. And then Elaine Cooper wrote a book called When Children Love to Learn. And there are a lot more books that are coming out now and a lot of different kind of umbrellas of people applying and studying how to make this method work in this world we're living in now. So,
thanks, Jane.
Yeah.
We're headed to the beach.
Enjoy the rest of summer, y'all.